Hi, Ollie. Welcome to episode 3 of this little vodcast series. I was just hoping if you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself. So when did you study at Reigate? What other subjects did you do? And what you're kind of up to now?
Hi, I'm Ollie. I was at Reigate from 2014 to 2016. I did maths, computing and product design. Went on to a maths degree, and at the moment I'm getting ready to go and do my master's.
So tell us a little bit more about your maths degree. What's your undergraduate degree in?
So my undergraduate degree is in straight mathematics, so BSc mathematics. Sorry, I'm not too sure what to add to that. We can do that
No,
again
it's fine. You've got a nice short title. Like lots of people do little tag-ons and
Yeah,
stuff, but it's really nice to talk to someone who's just done straight up maths, basically.
yeah. I mean, it's always a bit weird, really, because I feel like I should have more to say there, but it is just just what it is, I suppose. But
So, what have you studied during your degree?
So I think sort of the nice bit about doing just a BSc maths, it's you get to do a bit of everything really. So I did a bit of statistics. Of course, you do sort of the core maths as well, and also you went to do sort of, I suppose, sort of programming bits, sort of mathematical modelling. I mean, that's sort of my preferred area, but it kind of has a nice sort of mix of a little bit of everything. And I think then it's quite nice because once you've done it, you can then go in whatever direction you want to go afterwards. You can sort of find something you enjoy and then study it further or find a job that kind of satisfies your needs really, or your wants.
Yes, there's a lot more modelling in the A level now than there was when you undertook it. And just out of interest, kind of like taking that branch of modelling or modelling forward, what models have you studied at university, which like the one you like actually that's really interesting?
So I think I did my dissertation in a modelling subject. So I used partial differential equations, which is probably my favourite kind of area of it, to simulate pedestrian flow models.
Okay.
So it was sort of, if there was an evacuation in a room, sort of how quickly people would take to empty the room. And basically the key was I was trying to look for this idea that if people move slower, then the evacuation is actually faster because you don't get sort of all this bunching up as people are leaving. So that sort of this whole area is sort of partial differential equations. So it's things like convection and advection. And I kind of like the idea that you had to use, when I first sort of encountered them, you had to use sort of software and you had to write your own program to try and solve them using iterative methods. And I think that's what I quite enjoyed because it was sort of combining my skills from, I suppose, my computing A level sort of coding with that sort of math skills. And it's nice to be able to make use of all your skill set, I suppose, really. It's, it was really interesting, I thought.
No, it's amazing, really. I love maths for the reason that a lot of things which are really logical that you can say, okay, well, if we're all leaving this room, and if we kind of go in a relatively logical order and you don't all get up and run at the door at once, we'll get out quicker. But actually, when you say, okay, look, here is the mathematical model, and this proves that this actually really does work. Like there is a reason that we have like this orderly function, I suppose, in terms of how we leave or how we might structure something. And I think that's pretty interesting. So what are you going to do with your master's?
So it's sort of the direction I want to be heading really. So I did try a bit of employment. I was in a graduate job and I decided it wasn't really for me, to be honest. I wanted to go in a more technical direction. And I think that sort of technical direction is going sort of on the research and development side, sort of computational bits. And that's sort of that's the reason for my master's really. I'd like to go and sort of study more about that. So I'm actually doing it in artificial intelligence, so hopefully sort of gain that. I suppose that sort of more computational side of things, which I'm hoping will marry up quite neatly with what I've studied so far in maths.
So with kind of like the artificial intelligence, because obviously if we're on like hot degrees at the moment, I think that's a topic of real interest.
Yeah, I think so.
What is it, or what will you be kind of like looking at in your master's?
So I'm hoping that, I mean, again, I'm hoping for a bit of everything, to be honest. I mean, of course, a bit more specialization, but you know, in a bit more specialist area even. But I'm hoping that there'll be sort of bits of data analytics, which is, you know, quite hot at the moment. You know, the idea of, I suppose it's like advanced statistics, really, of trying to observe trends and future predictions, which, you know, it's very interesting. And then also it's, you know, I'd like to have that backing sort of a computational area. So, you know, I know I did, you know, the A-level in computing, but I feel like that's going to be very useful in the future. And then, of course, you know, the main big one of artificial intelligence and machine learning, of course, that's, you know, it's very useful, very relevant. And I think that will, you know, be very useful in the future.
Yeah, no, I think that's a definite, an absolute given, really. And I think it'll be amazing to see how things progress over the next like 5, 10, 20
Yeah,
years.
totally.
What about your A level did you enjoy the most, which made you think like, actually, I think I want to study maths more?
I think it's always a difficult one because I was always a bit unsure about what I wanted to do. Initially, I wanted to go and do engineering because I thought, oh, that's, you know, be good at that. But then after sort of starting in college, I started to realize how much I actually enjoyed maths. I enjoy sort of problem solving, and I suppose in a weird way, it's not, you know, the idea that everything connects together, really. You sort of start studying two different bits and then suddenly you sort of see all these connections and how they work. And I think in a way, sort of after realizing how it all sort of connects together and all sort of the problem solving, the logical side of it, it just made me want to sort of learn more, really. So I decided, well, actually, no, I don't want to do an engineering degree. I think I'll go and do mathematics instead. So yeah, that's what I did.
No, I think it's really good. And actually, you kind of open up another avenue of discussion. So I think for a lot of students, they see a degree as it should lead to a career. Like, and there's a lot of those available, like maths with finance and accounting and those type of things, where you can see quite a clear path, and obviously engineering, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
But I think the maths degree on its own is huge, but it's definitely vastly employable. But obviously it's quite a step to say like, that is what I'm just going to go study more maths. So with that in mind, did you tailor your degree at all in terms of the modules and bits you chose to do with maths, or have you tried to keep it really broad deliberately? Have you made any kind of decisions as you move forward throughout like your degree?
It's a tricky one. I sort of, you know, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I mainly tailored it by what I enjoyed. So, you know, I sort of did first year and I sort of found my interest in modeling. And that's sort of where I started to sort of carve my way towards, I suppose, pave my way towards. And I think that was, yeah, I think that was sort of what I was thinking as I was going throughout. I mean, I wasn't thinking too much about the employability at the end of it because I thought, you know, at the end of the day, it's doing something you enjoy. And that's more or less what I did then. You know, just sort of went ahead and did what I liked. And I suppose, you know, sometimes in some ways that works well, but I think in other ways it does mean that you can sort of shut yourself off at the end of it. But I wouldn't say I've regretted what I've done at all. I think, you know, I enjoy what I did, and it's been very useful.
Yeah, I think the enjoyment thing is massively important. We say it when students come into like college, like pick the things you enjoy because you're more likely to do well in them, number one.
Yeah, totally.
Um, Obviously there's an element of you need to be pretty good. Like if you're going to take a maths degree, you need to be pretty good. You do need to like maths. That's a fundamental, but
Yeah.
obviously the enjoyment characteristics obviously is very important as you move forward through it. With your degree in particular, was there quite a lot of choice of what you could mix and match into your degree, or was the structure fairly fixed for you?
I'd say it was mostly fixed. There were, you know, you did have an element of choice as to which modules you wanted to do. So I think, you know, we were quite a small cohort, but generally you found that people either sort of went in a more statistics side and did things like time series analysis and I suppose sort of regression, those kind of bits. And then you had other people who went down, I suppose, sort of the more computational side and modeling. So, of course, like I've mentioned, modeling, and there are a few in discrete algebra. So I think there was, you know, that you had sort of a bit of a pathway almost that you could have taken. And I sort of thought, well, I didn't really enjoy statistics that much, so I thought I'd go in the other route, because it seemed to be what I was better at. So yeah, I mean, there was, yeah, a sort of small bit of choice, but not masses, I suppose, but enough to sort of keep you
You've got a kind of like dream job in mind?
I think I wouldn't say I've got a dream job. I'd like to ideally go into sort of a research position, I think, sort of, you know, try to, I guess, extend my skills, really, sort of keep learning, to be honest. And I think alternatively, I would be interested in sort of doing further study after that as well. So I'm sort of trying to, you know, I try to keep it quite broad, really, but you know, I just think the whole sort of research and development side is probably where I'd like to be, and sort of anywhere within there that interests me is probably going to do me well, I suppose. It's you know.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's important for lots of people to realize, like, you don't necessarily need to know what you're aiming for in the long term, as long as you can enjoy it in the moment, in those bits and pieces. I'm sure there'll be some parents who watch that and say, no, you need to pick a career. But
Yeah.
I think the kind of like enjoyment of studying and where it's going to go.
One of the things that does interest me about modelling is how universal it is. You know, you can more or less apply it to any different company. So, for instance, I was previously working at a water company, and they used sort of the same partial differential equations for simulating pipe networks, which was, you know, it was something I never really considered before, but it was still quite interesting to learn about it. So I think that, you know, there's not a particular company that interests me, but just one that is interesting enough, if that makes sense. It sort of has the right, you know, sort of the right things that they're looking into. Then, you know, somewhere I'd be happy to go.
Yeah, I think it's a balance, isn't it? And obviously, if you find if you find the modelling itself, which you clearly do, interesting, then the gains you get from the modelling and seeing like your work come to fruition or reward, or you get the bits from that, rather than thinking about, okay, well, this is just like a water company, and I think a lot of students won't necessarily think about, okay, what if I look at like Thames Water, for example, you don't think, oh, there's loads of maths jobs like kind of going within that company, or even like things like Amazon, or I think companies maybe like Google and stuff, people perceive to have more mathematical based jobs. But I think it's really important to realize, if you go do a maths degree, you go understand a lot of this stuff, you become highly employable across many different fields.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, just kind of like for the students kind of like watching at home and those bits and pieces, is there any advice you would give them for their A level? Is there anything you found particularly useful, or a conversation you had and was like, actually, no, that was really good. I found those tips really, really helpful.
It's a tricky one. I think I'd probably sort of well, if I was doing it again, I'd remind myself to take breaks, I think, because, you know, it's all very easy to sort of overwork yourself and get stressed. And I think sort of taking regular breaks is just something that's quite useful, I suppose. Or at least I found it was, because you have a chance to sort of de-stress. Or, you know, if you went outside and, you know, just took a time away from your desk, really. And I think apart from that, I think, you know, just sort of picking something that you enjoy, I think is sort of the main thing that I probably echo, is just that's probably the key to all of this. If you pick something that you think you're good at but you won't like, then the chances are you probably won't like it at uni, I suppose, or whatever you go on to do. So I think sort of, you know, sticking to what you enjoy is the main thing.
When you transition from college to university, what was the kind of like big changes you noticed for you?
I think for me personally, I suppose it goes back to the taking breaks, really. I found that it was at times difficult to maintain the work-life balance. You know, I sort of found myself working, you know, quite late into the evenings and things like that. I suppose if, you know, that's when you work best, then, you know, that's again, it's all right. But, you know, at times, I suppose it gets a bit much when you're sort of trying to dedicate all your energy into doing, you know, just one subject. And I think sort of that time management can be crucial for then, you know, going into university, so you can be as productive as possible.
We say to students, "I'll go on an open day and see how it feels." And I I really do like believe that's so important, because you get a proper feeling of how
Yeah.
you feel in the place. And I think like some people might say, oh, you might not get the experience for like a week or two and you might not really know it. I think, but if you go to 5 and there's one you feel more at home at, the chances are that one is probably the right one for you.
I totally agree. You know, when I was going around open days, I think as soon as I went to Brooks, I was like, this is just really lovely. Everyone seems very friendly here, and it just seems like the place for me, I suppose. It's a weird feeling. It's like I didn't really know what I was looking for until you found it, I think. You know, if that makes any sense. But
Yeah, no, it makes total sense, particularly to me,
yeah,
because I had an interview at my university and I remember going, I was thinking, oh, I don't know if this one's really for me. I've been to like 3 or others. I was on kind of like the fence, I suppose, whether I was actually going to go to
yeah,
university at all anyway. And I went to this interview and I kind of like spent the day there doing all these little tasks and stuff. I was actually like, I feel so comfortable here. It felt so nice. And like at the end of the day, I was like, oh, I've got to go home. Like, and that was kind of the negative bit of the day. And I thought, actually, based on that experience alone, I think that tells me that this is kind of like my number one choice.
one sort of, I suppose, a bit of advice. I mean, I'm not, you know, I suppose people like giving advice. I feel a bit weird doing it, to be honest, sort of being on the other end of the spectrum here. But I think if I were to do it again, then I would have tried to take up more things like work experience opportunities sort of during my studying, because I think what I didn't realize was how useful they can be in terms of networking and just getting that experience. Because I've found personally, sort of going into graduate work, it's quite difficult to know the questions to be asking your interviews, or to what to be expecting, I suppose. So I think that if I had the experience beforehand, it would have been very useful. And of course, you know, the universities are great at helping out with that kind of thing as well. So it's a very good opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good tip. I think that the work experience, or if we go the American avenue and we start calling them the internships and those kind of bits and pieces, I think they're so, so important just to get an understanding of how things function a little bit more within a company. It might not be a company that you apply for a graduate scheme or a job for in the future, but just seeing how things work together and realizing that it kind of doesn't matter what company you work for. At some stage, you have to work with a load of different people, which I think in terms of maths, this is quite a regular experience. The people you are explaining things to may not understand what you're talking about in the slightest. And
Yeah,
while you might be able to do this really fancy model, which says this, and this, you have to still be able to go back into potentially like layman's terms, so to speak, and say, well, okay, I did this really important study and there's loads of numbers about it, but you guys don't really want that bit. What you need to know is this, and this. And I think that's obviously an important thing to realize, and just to understand that when you're on an interview and those different bits and pieces, it's about, I don't know, syncing with the company doesn't quite, it sounds a bit too computery, syncing with the company, but understanding what they're kind of looking for in the path they're going down. And I think when you've been and you've got some more experience in internships, you get that kind of understanding of what's important for companies.
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. Oh no, I know. I had another big question. Because you're modeling the current scenario, COVID.
Yeah.
Now, have you been looking at any of the models which have come out around COVID and the processes which have gone in place?
I've not done much sort of research myself. I've had a few customary looks over things. There are a few bits I actually did in my degrees or about epidemic modelling that I've tried to apply to COVID as well. So, I've sort of done, I suppose, my own bit of work on the side. It's not really work; it's more just having a bit of a fiddle around, to be honest. But
So tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing.
yeah, of course. So basically, it's how best to explain it. So the sort of main, I suppose, the main part of epidemic modelling is it's called the SIR model. I can't remember the exact word for it, but essentially it's the idea that you divide a population into different subgroups. So I suppose in the case of COVID-19, you've got your susceptible, so those are the people who could get it, and then you've got the infected ones who then do have it, and then you have either those who recover, or you have those who recover, and then you have a separate group who die. You can combine the last two, I think. So then what you do is you have an iterative relation. So for each next time step, you remove a percentage of the susceptible population into the infected, and then a percentage of those into the either the recovered or the died stages. It's quite difficult to explain, I think, sort of over just sort of chatting about it. But essentially, the idea is that as time goes on, your susceptible population starts to increase as your infected rises, and then ultimately, sort of, people who've died and recovered. So I think I'm right in saying that it is a basis for some of the ones that I think it's Sage use. Of course, sort of a lot more advanced. So I think they have different states for people who are like shielding or people who are partially isolated, and the different groups try and capture that movement. But the idea is that by doing this, you can then effectively predict where the peak's going to be, and then when we're going to sort of start having a reduction in deaths and infections. So it's really interesting actually. It's it's nice to know that there's something that I did in my degree that's very relevant, and it's also quite useful because now most members of the public know what modelling is. So I don't have to explain that too often.
So yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad to be helpful. Really, it's it's nice to have a chat.